telling you right now, what happened to us in the Rocky Mountains wasn't just an accident. It wasn't some weird coincidence. It was something far darker, something I still can't explain. It all started with one of my best friends disappearing in the dead of night. And I swear, it wasn't just a simple case of getting lost. There's something in those woods, something that changed us. You'll never guess what we found when we went searching for them. Stay with me. This is going to get weird. I've never been the same since that camping trip. It was supposed to be a peaceful getaway in the Rocky Mountains, a chance for me and my friends to reconnect with nature. We were 5 in total, myself, my brother Jake, and 3 other close friends. After setting up camp near a quiet lake, we sat around the fire, cracking jokes, drinking beers, and talking about anything and everything. Around midnight, we heard something strange. At first, it was just a rustling sound by the edge of the lake, like someone was moving through the trees. We brushed it off, assuming it was an animal. But then we noticed something even weirder. There was no wildlife, no frogs croaking, no crickets chirping, nothing. The whole forest went dead silent. Even the air seemed still, like something was watching us. That's when I saw it. A figure, no more than a shadow, moving at the far edge of our camp. It was tall, but it didn't look human. It was like a silhouette that didn't belong. I froze. My friends didn't see it, or maybe they were too drunk to notice, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was almost as if it was waiting for something, or someone. The next morning, one of our group, Sarah, was gone. We thought maybe she had just wandered off to pee in the woods, or had gotten lost while walking to the bathroom. But then we checked the tents. Her sleeping bag was undisturbed. Her shoes were still in the tent. There were no signs she'd left at all. We started calling her name, walking around the campsite, but she was nowhere. We checked the lake and the surrounding trails. Nothing. Then came the first of the strange things. As we searched the area, we found something that shouldn't have been there. Her backpack, lying in the middle of the trail leading into the forest, but it was half buried in the dirt, like someone had tried to hide it. Jake and I went off the path to investigate, but we didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just the eerie silence of the woods closing in around us. As we got further into the woods, I started to feel like we were being followed. It was like something was tracking our every move, watching from just behind the trees. We didn't find Sarah that day, but that night, something happened that none of us would ever forget. We set up a watch, taking turns staying awake to keep an eye out for any signs of Sarah, or anything else. Around 3 a.m., I was sitting alone by the fire, staring into the flickering flames when I heard it again. The rustling sound, closer this time. I grabbed a flashlight and stood up, shining the beam into the trees. That's when I saw it. A figure, not a person, but something that moved too fast, too fluidly to be human. It was crouched low, almost like a predator, watching us from behind a large pine tree. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. It was real. I was about to call out to the others when I heard Jake's voice, trembling, behind me. "Dude, do you hear that?" I turned around, and what I saw made my blood run cold. We weren't alone. We left the campsite in a rush the next morning, not even bothering to pack up properly. As we made our way back to the main trailhead, we kept hearing strange noises, footsteps, whispering voices, like the forest itself was alive, watching us, moving just out of sight. When we finally made it back to the parking lot, we found something that almost stopped my heart. Sarah's phone was lying on the ground near our cars. We had searched the entire area, but somehow it had been missed. We tried calling her, but the phone was dead. We left the mountains, shaken, but we had no answers. Months later, we heard a news story. A search party had been dispatched to look for a missing hiker. A young woman who had disappeared near the same lake where we had camped. Her name was Sarah. But when they found her, she was acting strange. She didn't remember anything from the time she went missing. She couldn't explain where she had been or what had happened to her. But something in her eyes, something in her mannerisms, told me she knew. She knew what had happened, but she was too afraid to talk about it. Imagine camping in a secluded part of the forest, alone. You hear a voice calling your name, but no one is around. Then it happens again and again. At first, you think you're just losing your mind, but then the voices start to sound too real. They start to follow you, every step you take, every corner you turn, and then you realize something you never should have. They aren't voices at all. Stay with me. This is one of the creepiest stories you'll ever hear. It was supposed to be a solo camping trip, just me and the wilderness. I drove out to a remote area in Northern California, miles from any civilization. It was a spot I'd read about online, quiet, peaceful, and perfect for clearing my head. I set up camp near a small stream. The only sound the soft gurgling of water and the rustling of leaves in the wind. That first night, everything seemed perfect. But as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, I began to hear something strange. Faint, indistinct whispers coming from the trees. At first, I thought it was just the wind, the sound of branches brushing together. But no, this was different. It was a low murmur, as if people were talking, but I couldn't make out any words. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was my mind playing tricks on me, but it got louder, closer. I could swear I heard my name, faintly drifting through the night air. Alex. My heart skipped a beat. There was no one else around. I stood up, my flashlight trembling in my hand, but the forest was completely still, not a soul in sight. The whispers didn't stop. They only got more intense, more insistent. I lay in my tent, clutching my sleeping bag, trying to block out the growing sense of unease. I was too scared to sleep, too terrified to move. It felt as though the voices were coming from all around me, behind me, next to me, inside my head. At one point, I got up to investigate. I figured if I could just find the source of the noise, maybe it would stop. But as I walked deeper into the trees, the voices started following me. The more I moved, the closer they seemed to get. I turned, convinced someone was out there, someone who was messing with me. But when I looked around, there was no one. Nothing but the cold dark of the forest. I started running back to my camp, heart pounding in my chest, but the whispers didn't stop. They chased me all the way back. The whispers didn't stop. In fact, they grew louder, more distinct. As I lay frozen in my tent, my body tense with fear, I realized something horrifying. The voice I had heard, my name, wasn't coming from far away. It was coming from right outside the tent. Alex. I barely breathed. I didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. The whisper seemed so close. It was as though whoever, or whatever it was standing just inches from me. My flashlight lay just beyond my reach. but I was too terrified to grab it. I could hear the faint rustling of the leaves in the wind, but the voice was now completely silent. It was as if the whole forest was holding its breath. I told myself to be rational. There was a logical explanation for this, right? Maybe someone else was out there, messing with me. Maybe it was a prank. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. This wasn't human. Not the way the voice lingered, soft yet sharp in its precision. It was too deliberate, too unnatural. Another whisper came, a little louder this time, and it was definitely from inside my tent. "Alex, we see you." The words sank into my chest like ice. I couldn't even move. I wanted to scream, but my throat was constricted, choked with fear. I had no idea what to do, what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone. There was something out there, something that wanted me to hear it, to know it was there. Then, without warning, a loud crack broke the silence, like a branch snapping right outside my tent. It wasn't the wind. It was too forceful. Someone, or something, was moving through the brush. The whispering stopped, but the oppressive silence that followed was worse. My pulse raced, and for the first time in my life, I felt utterly powerless. I slowly, cautiously, unzipped the flap of my tent, hoping beyond hope that I was just overreacting, that I was imagining things. But when the flap opened, the forest didn't look the way it had hours before. The trees, normally calming and familiar, looked twisted, bent in ways that weren't natural. Shadows that shouldn't have been there seemed to stretch out longer, almost like they were reaching for me. And that's when I heard it again. "Alex, ... This time, it was right behind me. I whirled around, and my flashlight beam cut through the dark. It swept across the trees, the ground, the space around me. Nothing. The forest stood still, too still. But then, in the corner of my eye, I saw something move. Fast. It was barely a blur, a shape darting from tree to tree, just out of sight. But it was there. I could feel it watching me. In that moment, I knew I wasn't dealing with a prank. Whatever it was out there, it was following me, toying with me. The whispers hadn't just been sounds, carried on the wind. They had been intentional. And now, they weren't just words. They were a warning. I grabbed my bag, shoved everything inside without thinking, and without looking back, I ran. I didn't care about anything but getting out of that forest. I didn't even remember picking up my flashlight. My feet barely touched the ground as I sprinted through the dark, crashing through the underbrush, my heart thumping in my ears. I ran, and I ran, and I didn't stop until I hit the main trail, gasping for breath, my mind spinning. But even then, the whispers followed me, deep inside my skull, echoing in my head. Alex. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, somewhere in the woods, watching me. In didn't even stop to look back. I just kept running until I reached my car, threw my gear in the back, and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking as I started the engine, and I swear I heard the whisper again, soft and distant, just as I pulled out of the campground. "We'll be waiting."